Tonight, we step into a medieval world where the law did not stop at humans. Pigs could be put on trial, rats could be summoned to court, roosters could be accused of impossible crimes, and even insects might receive a formal warning from the church. It sounds ridiculous now, but behind these strange animal laws were fear, hunger, superstition, and the desperate need to make sense of a chaotic world. So get comfortable, slow your breathing, and if you enjoy these strange journeys into the past, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's wander into the candlelit courts of medieval beasts. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself at the edge of a walled town, just as dusk lowers itself over the fields like a wool blanket shaken out by tired hands. Cold stone waits beneath your palm, damp straw clings to your boots, and smoke gathers in the rafters of the gatehouse ahead, where a torch spits orange light into the river mist. Somewhere beyond the walls, monastery bells count the hour, slow and hollow, while a horse snorts steam into the winter air as if deeply unimpressed by history. Mud pulls at your soles, your cloak smells faintly of wet sheep, and medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You probably would not last a week out here, not with the cold, the fleas, the mysterious stew, and the legal system apparently willing to accuse livestock of crimes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell us down in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is in your little corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand beneath the town gate while the last of the daylight drains from the sky, and the world becomes the colour of pewter, smoke, and old bread. The road behind you has been a long one, rutted deep by carts and rain, patched here and there with broken brushwood that does not help much, though everyone politely pretends it does. Your feet are numb inside your boots, your fingers ache where they curl around the strap of your satchel. Above you, the gate tower leans into the evening, its stones dark with age, its narrow windows glowing faintly where someone has placed a beeswax candle in a slit of the wall. The porter eyes you from his stool beside the oak door. He's wrapped in a fur-lined cloak, though the fur has clearly seen better animals, better winters, and perhaps better moral decisions. Beside him hangs a ring of iron keys, each one large enough to look important even if half of them probably open nothing anymore. He asks where you come from, and you tell him the name of the last village. The one with the flooded ford and the miller who swore the river had risen because St. Clement was displeased with someone's cheese. No one can quite agree whether that was a joke, a warning, or simply the miller's way of avoiding blame for the missing footbridge. The porter nods as if all of this is perfectly reasonable. In a place like this, rivers sulk, saints take sides, owls predict weather, and a badly behaved animal may find itself treated with more paperwork than a careless apprentice. Inside the gate, the town folds around you in layers of sound and smell. The street is narrow, squeezed between timber houses whose upper stories lean toward one another like old women trading secrets. Rushes lie scattered over stone thresholds, damp from the day's traffic. A woman in a russet gown sweeps them aside with a birch broom, muttering that fresh rushes would have been laid already if her son had not spent the afternoon watching two men argue over a goose. A tanner's yard breathes its sharp stink into the lane. From an open doorway comes the warm smell of pottage thick with onions, peas, and whatever root survived the cellar. Somewhere, a child laughs, then is hushed. Somewhere else, a pig squeals, and several adults immediately sound guilty. You notice that at once. The pig is not in the lane, not yet, but its voice travels through the town like a small cracked trumpet. A dog lifts its head beneath a cart, listens, and lowers its muzzle back onto its paws. The cart itself has a broken wheel, propped against the wall beside a stack of firewood, and you're just tired enough to feel a strange sympathy for it. Everyone here seems held together by pegs, rope, habit, and prayer. You make your way toward the market square, following the movement of townsfolk who are not walking quickly, exactly, but drifting in the same direction with the particular energy of people pretending not to be curious. A fishwife carries a basket of smoked fish beneath one arm, her other hand tucked beneath her cloak for warmth. Two apprentices in wool caps whisper behind her. A reeve, stiff-backed and red-nosed from cold, strides past with a wax tablet under his arm. His boots splash through a puddle, and he does not apologize to the puddle, though after what you have heard about local justice, perhaps he should. At the corner of the square, beneath the carved sign of an alehouse called the Bent Spoon, you hear the rumour clearly for the first time. "They are summoning the sow," says a man with a beard full of supper crumbs. "Not summoning," says another, presenting, as if she knows the difference. She knows enough to break a fence. She is a pig. Breaking fences is practically her trade. The men fall silent when they see you listening, but only for the length of one breath, because medieval privacy is a delicate thing, usually dead by sunset. The bearded man gestures you closer with 2 fingers and lowers his voice to a stage whisper that carries to everyone within 10 paces. "A pig from the lower lane," he says, black-backed, mean-eyed, belongs to Widow Alice, though she says it belongs more to the devil when it finds a cabbage patch. It got loose by the bakehouse, ruined a pile of loaves, bit through a basket, knocked over old Martin's stool, and caused such a noise that the bailiff was called from his supper. "Ruined a pile of loaves," the other man repeats gravely, as if describing a siege. You look toward the centre of the square, where the last market stalls are being closed. Cloth is folded, wooden buckets are stacked. A woman counts eggs into a wicker basket with the care of a jeweller handling pearls. The town cross stands in the middle, damp and dark, with a little heap of melted candle stubs at its base. A pilgrim badge, shaped like a scallop shell, gleams on someone's hat as he passes. Above the rooftops, the bells sound again, slow and patient, marking time for the living, the sleepy, and apparently the legally inconvenient. Some swear that animals brought before courts must be named properly, witnessed properly, and accused properly, because a town that cannot order its beasts may not be trusted to order its people. Others say the whole business is half law, half ritual, and half entertainment, which is too many halves but feels correct after a long day. In manor courts and church courts, in villages where every fence matters and every loaf has value, creatures are sometimes treated as if they stand inside the same moral weather as humans. A pig may be blamed, a cow may be impounded, a swarm may be cursed, a goat may owe more in damages than a poor man owns in socks, and a poor man may own no socks at all. You do not laugh too loudly. The cold keeps humour modest. A gust of wind slips along the street and pushes smoke from a chimney down into the square. You breathe it in with the smell of wet wool, dung, onions, and candle grease. Near the alehouse door, an old woman sells little bundles of dried herbs tied with thread rosemary for remembrance, rue for protection, and a bit of yarrow for wounds, though she admits it works best when the wound is not too ambitious. She tells a girl that hanging rowan over a byre door keeps ill luck from the animals, unless the ill luck has already learned the back way in. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she believes this fully or simply knows that frightened people buy herbs more readily than calm people. You buy a coarse heel of bread from a stall before it closes, and it is hard enough to make you consider whether the town might summon the baker next. Still, you eat it gratefully. Hunger has a way of softening judgment. Around you, shutters close one by one. A bellman walks past with a lantern and a staff, calling for fires to be covered, doors barred, and good Christians to keep peace through the night. His lantern swings, lighting his face from below in a way that makes him look like a saint who has not slept well. Then the crowd stirs. At the far side of the square, under the archway that leads toward the manor yard, a small procession appears. First comes a boy carrying a torch, his cheeks red with cold. Behind him walks the reeve with his wax tablet, then two men pulling a rope, and at the end of the rope comes the pig. She is broad, dark, bristling, and deeply unwilling to participate in civic life. Her hooves scrape the stones, her ears twitch, her snout shines with the mud. She does not look guilty so much as offended, which, considering the evening, may be the more sensible expression. Widow Alice follows behind with her hands folded into her sleeves, her face tight and tired. She wears a patched blue cloak and a linen coif pulled low over her brow. People make room for her, not because they are kind exactly, but because everyone knows how easily misfortune can move from one household to another. Today it is her pig. Tomorrow it may be someone else's ox in the barley, someone else's dog among the geese, someone else's rooster making theological difficulties before breakfast. The pig stops near the town cross and gives one violent shake. The rope jerks, the torch flame gutters. A child gasps with delight and is immediately pulled behind his mother's skirt. The bailiff emerges from the manor arch with the expression of a man who has been taken away from hot food for a cold reason. He carries himself with ceremony, but his cap sits crooked, and there is a smear of gravy on one sleeve. You tuck your bread into your cloak and drift closer with the others. The square grows quieter, though not silent. There is still the creak of signs, the cough of a mule, the soft clatter of wooden pattens on stone, the wet shuffle of the pig's hooves. Somewhere behind you, the dog beneath the broken cart rises and pads nearer, tail low, as if even he knows that something unusually human is about to happen to an animal. The bailiff speaks with the reeve scratches marks onto his tablet. Widow Alice whispers to a neighbour. The pig sniffs the ground near the candle stubs and seems, for one dangerous moment, interested in eating evidence. No one can quite agree whether these proceedings are meant to punish the beast, warn the owner, calm the village, please God, or reassure everyone that the world is not merely mud, hunger, teeth, and accident. Perhaps they are all of these things at once. The Middle Ages do not always separate law from fear, or fear from faith, or faith from the need to stand in a square at dusk and feel that someone, somewhere, is in charge. The bailiff lifts one hand. The bells fade into the darkening air. You stand among wool cloaks and tired faces, with smoke in your throat and cold stone under your boots, while a pig accused of ruinous behaviour waits beneath torchlight as solemnly as any troublesome tenant with hooves can manage. And the town leans in to listen. The bailiff's raised hand holds the square in stillness only for a moment, because cold people do not remain still for long, and pigs remain still for even less. The black-backed sow jerks her snout toward the candle stubs beneath the town cross, then thinks better of it when Widow Alice gives the rope a weary tug. A few words pass between the bailiff and the reeve, low enough that you catch only pieces loaves, damage, witness, tomorrow, Manor Hall. The crowd seems disappointed that no thunderbolt of justice falls immediately from the winter sky. Medieval evenings, like medieval bread, often require more chewing than expected. You remain near the edge of the gathering while the townsfolk begin to loosen and drift apart. Someone laughs softly. Someone else mutters that a pig allowed until morning has already received more mercy than certain husbands. The bailiff announces that the matter will be heard properly, with names set down and testimony taken, and the pig, apparently unconvinced by due process, scratches one muddy flank against the post of the town cross. The torchboy leads the little procession away toward a covered pen near the manor yard, and Widow Alice follows with a face like a banked fire. The reeve tucks his tablet into his sleeve. The dog from beneath the broken cartwheel pads after the crowd for a few steps, then pauses beside you, as if weighing whether you're more interesting than a pig on trial. You offer him nothing but the smell of coarse bread, and still he remains nearby. Some swear dogs can tell when a stranger is bound for trouble, though others say dogs can mostly tell when strangers have crumbs. You turn from the square just as the evening deepens into a blue-black hush. A lay brother from the nearby monastery, small and square as a bread loaf, has been sent to guide travellers to the guest house before the gates are barred for the night. He carries a lantern in one hand and a staff in the other. His wool habit is dark with a rein at the hem, and his tonsured head glows faintly in the lantern light, giving him the look of a candle that has taken religious vows. You follow him through a side lane where the houses fall quieter. The mud here is thicker, churned by cartwheels and hooves, and the smell changes from market smoke to damp hay, cold iron, and the faint sour breath of stables. Above the rooftops, the monastery tower shows itself, pale against the sky, and its bell begins to sound for Compline. Each note rolls over the town slowly, touching roof tiles, chimneys, fences, and the wet backs of animals shut into their yards. At the monastery gate, the lay brother knocks with the butt of his staff. An iron grille opens. A pair of eyes examines you, your cloak, your satchel, your boots, and possibly your soul, though it is hard to tell in such poor light. Then the oak door groans inward, and you enter a courtyard laid with uneven stones. Rainwater gleams in the cracks. A trough stands near the wall, rimmed with a skin of ice. Beyond it, narrow windows burn gold where beeswax candles shine inside. The guest house is warmer than the street, though not by a heroic amount. Rushes cover the floor, fresh enough to smell faintly sweet beneath the damp. A small fire works at the hearth with the tired persistence of an old mule. Wooden bowls sit on a board near a pot of thin pottage, and a dish of coarse salt rests beside a stack of trenchers. You accept a bowl, wrap both hands around it, and feel the heat soak into your fingers. It tastes of barley, onions, and whatever else the kitchen brother could persuade from the winter storehouse without causing a theological argument. Near the hearth sits a monk with ink on his thumb, his sleeve, and one cheek. He's bent over a strip of parchment, scratching words with a quill trimmed so sharply it looks ready to accuse someone by itself. A little horn of ink rests beside him. Sand for drying script lies in a shallow dish. Beside that sits a wax tablet filled with names, marks, and crossings out. He glances up when you enter, and the candle catches his eyes. "You saw the sow," he says. "It is not a question." You nod and lower yourself onto a bench. The wood is polished by generations of cold travellers shifting uneasily through the night. The dog has not been permitted into the guest house, but you hear a faint scrape outside the door and suspect he has not accepted the ruling. The monk dips his quill again. They will want the account set down properly. The creature's owner, the witnesses, the value of the loaves, the place where the fence failed, the words spoken by those who saw it, A case without names is only gossip with a belt on. You ask, quietly, whether a pig truly needs to be named in a court. He gives you a look that is not unkind, but suggests that you have asked whether rain is wet. Everything in law requires a name. He says, a man, a widow, a field, a cart, a debt, a beast. If there is harm, someone must say what caused it. If there is complaint, someone must answer, even if the answer is only grunting. Outside, the bell continues its slow calling. The sound moves through the beams above you, where smoke has blackened the rafters over many winters. A few other travellers sit along the walls, a peddler with a pack full of bone combs and cheap pilgrim badges, a carter whose broken wheel lies somewhere back in the market lane, and a woman carrying a covered basket that clucks once, softly, before she gives it a firm tap. No one remarks on it. In a monastery guest house, one learns not to ask too many questions about baskets after dark. The monk tells you that a summons must be made in a manner people recognize. Sometimes a reeve speaks it before the manor court. Sometimes a notice is read where neighbours gather, at a church porch, a market cross, or beside the very field that has suffered damage. For creatures that cannot understand human speech, people still perform the words because the words are not only for the creature, they are for the village, for memory, for order, for the nervous hearts of those who must keep living beside pens, barns, woods, rivers, and teeth. No one can quite agree whether the animals are thought to understand, or whether the speaking itself is meant to mend the tear in the world. The monk admits this with a small shrug, as if uncertainty is not a flaw in the system, but part of its furniture. A pig may be held because people saw it destroy what was precious. A swarm may be cursed because it devoured a field. Rats may be summoned because they came by night and left only husks. Law, prayer, custom, and common fear all sit at the same table here, sharing one candle and pretending not to notice one another's elbows. He scratches another line onto the parchment. The quill makes a dry insect-like sound. Names also keep blame from spreading too far, he says. If the black-backed sow of Widow Alice is accused, then not all pigs are accused. If witnesses say the lower fence was broken, then perhaps the widow must mend it, and perhaps the baker is owed payment, and perhaps the town sleeps easier because the matter has edges. You sip your pottage. It warms your throat. The monk's words settle around you with the firelight. You think of the pig under torchlight, stubborn and bristling, and of Widow Alice's tired face. You think of loaves trampled into mud, and of how much flour means in winter. In a world where hunger waits just beyond the door, a ruined basket is not a small thing. It may be ridiculous, yes, to summon a pig like a troublesome tenant, but it is also strangely practical. Someone must speak for the loss. Someone must count the damage. Someone must stand in the square and say that the town has not surrendered entirely to chaos. The monk smiles faintly, perhaps noticing the thought pass over your face. You begin to see it. Perhaps, you say, "Careful," he murmurs. That is how courts get you. The peddler chuckles in the corner, then turns it into a cough when the monk looks over. A novice enters to lay more rushes near the door. Tucked into his belt is a sprig of rosemary, which he says his grandmother insists keeps away nightmares, fleas, and bad arguments. Some swear rosemary under a pillow sharpens memory, though the novice confesses it mostly sharpens the smell of the pillow. He bows awkwardly and disappears again into the corridor, leaving behind a draught of cold air and the scent of wet stone. The monk sands the fresh writing and lifts the parchment carefully. "Tomorrow," he says, "the sow's matter will be heard. Tonight, the summons is enough, a name, a charge, a place, a witness. That is how even foolish things become official. The fire pops softly. The candles bend in the draught. Outside, something scratches once at the lower part of the oak door, and you imagine the stray dog curled beneath the eaves, waiting with the patience of an unpaid clerk. You settle deeper into your cloak. The guest house grows quieter, bowls empty, travellers murmur. The bell's last note fades, and the monk returns to his copying, setting down human words for animal trouble while the night gathers around the monastery walls. Morning comes without hurry, as if the sun itself has little desire to climb over such cold roofs. You wake on the guest-house bench with your cloak pulled tight beneath your chin, the wool rough against your cheek, the smell of smoke still caught in your hair. The fire has fallen low, the rushes near the door are flattened by boots, and on the table beside the hearth, the monk's half-burned candle has hardened into a crooked pool of wax, somewhere beyond the wall. The monastery bell begins to mark the day, not cheerfully, exactly, but with the patient voice of something that has been waking people before dawn for centuries and sees no reason to stop now. You eat a small breakfast of coarse bread dipped in thin ale, because water is treated with suspicion and ale, though weak, at least has the courtesy to taste like someone tried. The carter with the broken wheel sits across from you, rubbing grease into his cracked hands and insisting that ash mixed with goose fat is the finest cure for winter skin. Some swear by it, others swear at it, even now. It is hard to tell whether the remedy helps the hands or merely makes them smell too alarming for the cold to approach. The ink-stained monk is already awake, of course. Men who copy saints' lives seem to sleep in narrow slices, like cheese shaved from a careful knife. He folds the parchment concerning the sow and ties it with thread, then hands it to the lay brother who will carry it to the manor hall. He notices you watching and gives the smallest nod. "You may see the matter heard," he says, quietly. You promise quietness, which is easy to promise before a pig is brought before a court. Outside, the town has turned silver with frost. Roof thatch glitters, the dung heaps steam gently, smoke rises from chimneys in thin blue threads, and the street stones shine where last night's mud has frozen into ridges. You step through the monastery gate with your satchel over one shoulder, and there, under the eaves, waits the stray dog from the market square. He stands, stretches his forelegs, yawns with great seriousness, and falls into step beside you as if the two of you reached an agreement sometime during the night. The path toward the manor yard leads past shuttered shops and early stalls. A woman lays out onions in neat heaps. A boy carries a wooden yoke with 2 buckets, walking carefully so the water does not slop over and freeze on his shoes. Near the bakehouse, people are already gathering in little knots, their breath white in the morning air. They speak softly, but their eyes are bright. A trial, even a ridiculous one, gives shape to a cold day. It is not every morning that one gets to leave chores behind and watch justice consider a pig. The manor hall stands beyond the market square, low and solid, with an oak door darkened by many hands. Near it rises the gallows, not grand, not dramatic, simply a timber frame at the edge of the yard, weathered by rain and old use. Its presence changes the air. People do not stare at it for long. They glance, then look away, then glance again. The pig's hearing is not held beneath it exactly, but close enough that everyone understands the shadow without anyone needing to speak of it. A muddy space has been cleared before the hall. The reeve stands with his wax tablet tucked against his chest. The bailiff arrives wrapped in a heavy cloak, blinking as if sleep has followed him from bed and still clings to his eyelashes, His cap is straighter today, though not enough to inspire confidence. 2 manor servants drag a bench into place. Another sets a stool near the door. A clerk from the hall spreads parchment on a board and holds his quill ready, looking colder than the ink. Villagers press around the edges. Widow Alice stands apart, hands hidden in her sleeves, her blue cloak stiff with frost at the hem. You see the baker nearby, broad-faced and solemn, with flour still caught in the lines of his knuckles. Beside him is old Martin, whose stool, you gather, was knocked over in yesterday's chaos. He carries the damaged stool as if it were a wounded companion, which feels excessive until you remember that good wood is not easily wasted and pride is harder to mend than furniture. Then the pig arrives. She comes between 2 men holding ropes, her hooves sliding in the churned mud, her dark bristles rimed faintly with frost. She grunts once, low and irritated, and the stray dog beside you takes 3 cautious steps backward. The pig's snout is tied loosely enough to breathe, but not enough to test the baker's remaining goods. Around you, the crowd leans in, not too much. Nobody wishes to be remembered as the person bitten during a legal proceeding. The bailiff clears his throat. The sound is thin at first, so he does it again with more authority. The reeve speaks the charge, the sow belonging to Widow Alice, found loose near the bakehouse, did break through a fence, overturn a basket, ruin loaves set to cool, disturb the peace, and cause injury to property and dignity. The word dignity receives a murmur of appreciation from those who enjoy a well-dressed accusation. No one can quite agree whether the pig listens. Her ears twitch at the reeve's voice. Her eyes are small and dark. She looks at the baker, then at the mud, then toward a heap of straw as if considering escape into agriculture. Still, the words are spoken, and because they are spoken before witnesses, they become heavier than ordinary talk. The baker steps forward first. He describes the loaves, rye loaves, coarse but sound, set upon a board by the bakehouse wall. He had risen before dawn, he says, kneaded while the town still slept, and paid good coin for flour. When the sow came crashing through the lower fence, she trod 3 loaves into the dirt and chewed a 4th so thoroughly that even the poorest apprentice declined it. This last detail brings a soft laugh, quickly swallowed. The bailiff does not smile, though one corner of his mouth appears to consider treason. Old Martin gives his account next. His stool was overturned, his back was startled, and his good cap fell into a puddle. The stool is shown. The clerk writes. The pig grunts. Widow Alice closes her eyes for one brief moment, perhaps praying, perhaps counting the cost, perhaps imagining a life in which she kept chickens instead. Then Widow Alice speaks. Her voice is quiet, but the square hears her. She says the fence was mended with willow wands after the last storm, that the sow has been restless, that no harm was intended, and that winter has been hard. There is a pause after this. Hard winter is a language everyone understands. In the storehouses, onions soften, grain runs low, smoked fish disappears too quickly, and every creature, 2-legged or 4, grows bold when hungry. The bailiff consults the reeve. The clerk scratches on the parchment. A servant brings forward a length of broken fence, absurdly solemn in his hands. The pig sniffs it with interest, as though recognizing an old opponent. Some swear that certain animals know guilt when confronted with the object of their offence. Others say people see guilt wherever they have already placed it. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the sow's stillness is remorse, boredom, or the discovery that legal timber is not edible. After a long murmur of judgment, the bailiff speaks. The widow must pay for the ruined loaves according to their worth. The fence must be repaired properly before the week is out. The sow must be kept under stronger watch, and until then, she is to remain impounded in the manor pen. The words fall like small stones into the cold morning. It is not the grand punishment some in the crowd expected. It is not nothing, either. The baker nods, not happily, but with the tired satisfaction of a man whose loss has been named. Widow Alice lowers her head. The pig, released from the centre of attention, immediately attempts to nose toward the straw. The crowd begins to loosen, boots sucking softly in the mud. The gallows stands silent behind the yard, unused, and perhaps that is mercy enough for this morning. You step back as the pig is led away, still bristling, still offended, but no longer quite the centre of the world. Beside you, the stray dog returns and noses your hand. The monastery bell sounds again in the distance, and you realize that the town has done what it came to do. It has taken hunger, accident, anger, and a broken fence, and wrapped them in words until they seem less wild. By the time the manor yard empties, the frost has begun to soften along the edges of the stones, and the town resumes its ordinary breathing. Doors open wider, smoke thickens above the roofs. A woman shakes a mat from an upper window, scattering dust that drifts down like tired snow. The baker carries his named losses back toward the bakehouse. Old Martin bears his injured stool with a dignity almost equal to the accusation itself, and Widow Alice follows the manor servant toward the pen where her sow will spend the day under official displeasure. The pig vanishes behind a gate with one last offended grunt, as if she intends to appeal to a higher court, preferably one stocked with turnips. You stand a moment longer, listening to the bell fade across the roofs. The stray dog sits beside your boots and watches the pen door close. He seems disappointed by the lack of crumbs, drama, or both. When you finally turn toward the east gate, he rises without invitation and follows, his paws leaving small dark prints in the thawing mud. The road out of town runs past a smithy, where the smith's boy pumps the bellows with red hands and sleepy eyes. Sparks leap from the forge like tiny orange insects. A horseshoe hangs above the door for luck, though it is fixed crookedly, and no one can quite agree whether luck runs into a crooked horseshoe or leaks out of it. The smith's wife sprinkles a pinch of salt near the threshold, murmuring that salt keeps away spite, illness, and certain neighbours. She sees you looking and shrugs, as if to say that a pinch of salt costs less than a physician and is more pleasant company. Beyond the gate, the fields open white and wide beneath a pale winter sun. Frost lies on the furrows, hedgerows shine with ice, crows hop along a ridge of frozen earth, each one black as ink spilled from the monk's horn. The road is hard beneath your boots now, no longer sucking at your soles, and for a little while the walking is easier. Your breath goes before you in soft clouds. Your cloak brushes against your knees. In the distance, a line of pollarded willows marks a stream, and beyond that rises the low roof of a farmstead, its thatch patched with straw and moss. A carter passes you slowly, leading his horse by the bridle while his repaired cart creaks behind him. It is the same carter from the monastery guest house, the one whose broken wheel leaned in the market lane. He has lashed it back together with rope and hope, which are, in the medieval world, almost a recognized building material. He greets you with a nod and offers a strip of dried apple from a pouch. You accept it, chew carefully, and taste smoke, sweetness, and cellar dust. He has heard, of course, about the sow's judgment before you can tell him. News moves along roads faster than carts, faster than weather, and sometimes faster than truth. By the time it leaves the next village, the pig may have broken 6 fences, swallowed a baker's board, and argued Latin before the bailiff. The carter laughs softly at that, then glances toward the farmstead ahead. "That is nothing," he says. "Wait until you hear what they once did with a rooster in these parts." "You look at him." The dog looks at him too, though perhaps only because he hears the tone people use before mentioning food. The carter lowers his voice, not because anyone else is near, but because some stories ask to be told as if walls have ears even when there are no walls. "Years ago," he says, or perhaps in his father's time, or perhaps in his father's father's time, because those who tell the tale never fully agree. There was a rooster in a village beyond the willow stream, a proud bird, bright-necked, sharp-spurred, forever strutting over the dung-heap as though crowned emperor of every hen, goose, child, and bucket within sight. It woke the village before matins, bullied the smaller cocks, and once pecked a visiting reeve so neatly on the ankle that people remembered it with admiration despite themselves. Then, one morning, the farmer's wife found an egg in the rooster's corner. Not in the hen's straw, not under the old speckled layer, in the rooster's own little patch of litter near the byre wall, where he had scratched and strutted and offended everyone since Michaelmas. The egg was small, oddly shaped, and the colour of dirty chalk. No one wanted to touch it. At this point the carter crosses himself with 2 fingers, casually but not jokingly. You feel the road grow quieter around you, though it is only the winter fields holding their breath. The dog trots ahead, nose down, entirely unmoved by poultry theology. Some swear that a rooster's egg, if warmed by a serpent or sat upon by a toad, may hatch a cockatrice, that terrible little monster of sermons and fireside warnings, poisonous in breath, deadly in glance, and generally inconvenient for village life. Others say such tales grow from malformed eggs laid by ordinary hens, from fear, from boredom, and from the human need to make even barnyard confusion feel like a sign from beyond the clouds, even now. It is hard to tell whether the people feared the egg itself, the rooster's pride, or the possibility that nature had briefly misplaced its proper order. You reach the willow stream as the carter speaks. A narrow plank bridge crosses the water, rimmed with frost at the edges. Beneath it, the stream moves slowly, black and glassy, whispering under a skin of thin ice. Someone has tied a strip of cloth to a branch beside the bridge, a little charm for safe crossing, faded almost white by weather. You pause to let the horse step first. Its iron shoes ring softly on the wood. The village, the carter says, did what villagers do when uncertain it gathered. The farmer brought the rooster in a wicker crate. The priest came from the church with his stole tucked under his cloak. The reeve came with a tablet. The farmer's wife carried the egg in a wooden bowl lined with ash, holding it away from her body as though it had insulted her personally. Children were kept back, which naturally meant they saw everything. Old women argued over whether the egg should be burned, buried at a crossroads, thrown into running water, or placed beneath an upturned pot until someone more educated arrived to be frightened by it. The rooster, meanwhile, crowed. This detail troubles the carter most. He says the bird crowed 3 times while people debated, and some took that as defiance. Others took it as habit. You understand habit. Much of medieval life seems built from it bells at fixed hours, bread from old ovens, ale from familiar vats, prayers worn smooth by repetition, rushes swept out and laid again, fences mended because beasts do not respect legal boundaries unless boundaries are made of something firmer than wishful thinking. The rooster was accused, so the tale goes, not exactly of laying the egg in the way a hen lays one, but of producing an unnatural sign, bringing fear into the household, troubling the peace, and threatening Christian order by means of suspicious poultry. The phrasing, the carter admits, may have improved over the years. A good story gathers ribbons as it travels. At the farmstead ahead, smoke drifts from a low chimney. You pass a yard where hens scratch at straw near a trough. Perfectly ordinary, or so you hope. A rooster stands atop a dung heap, red comb bright against the frost, and turns one golden eye toward you with the steady calm of a creature unaware of its legal reputation. The dog stops beside the fence and watches him. The rooster fluffs his feathers. For one breath, the world holds itself between absurdity and omen. Then the bird crows loud and ragged. The carter laughs under his breath, but he also crosses himself again. You continue along the road, leaving the farm behind. The tale has no agreed ending. Some say the egg was burned in the churchyard with prayers. Some say it was thrown into the stream and cracked on a stone. Some say a learned clerk declared it a hen's mistake, and fined no one except the farmer for wasting everyone's morning. No one can quite agree whether the rooster was punished, pardoned, or simply watched with deep suspicion, until Lent. The winter sun climbs a little higher. Frost melts from the hedges in silver drops. Your boots strike the road in a slow, steady rhythm, and the dog trots close beside you, as if glad that, whatever strange laws rule this land, no one has yet summoned him for walking without permission. The rooster's cry follows you for longer than it should, bouncing from the farmyard to the hedgerow, from the hedgerow to the frozen ditch, until at last it thins into the morning air and becomes only another village sound folded into the road behind you. You keep walking eastward, with the carter's repaired wheel creaking beside you for a while, and the stray dog trotting close enough to your heel that his shoulder brushes your boot whenever he forgets the road is wide. Frost softens under the rising sun. The mud returns slowly, first as a shine in the ruts, then as a dark sucking paste at the edges where carts have broken the earth. By mid-morning, the road bends toward an abbey standing beyond a long slope of winter fields. Its tower rises pale against a low sky, and its bells begin before you reach the outer wall, calling the brothers to their appointed hour. The sound is gentler here than the town bell, less like command and more like breath. It spreads over the bare orchards, the fish ponds glazed with ice, the barns, the dovecote, the kitchen garden, and the little houses where lay workers mend tools, turn cheeses, and argue about firewood with all the quiet devotion that keeps holy places from falling apart. The carter turns toward the stable yard to ask after a spare pin for his wheel, leaving you with a nod and a warning not to trust any poultry that looks too thoughtful. You thank him, which feels like the proper response to wisdom, however oddly shaped. The dog continues with you to the abbey gate, though he is stopped there by a lay brother holding a broom as if it were a spear. "No dogs in the garden," the brother says. The dog looks at him with the calm disbelief of one who has heard unjust law before. You leave him beneath the wall, where he circles twice and settles on a patch of straw near a pile of split wood. He watches you pass through the gate with wounded dignity, as though he too has been summoned, judged, and found inconvenient. Inside the abbey close, the air smells of beeswax, damp earth, cabbage leaves, and cold stone. A path of worn flags leads between herb beds sleeping under straw covers. Even in winter, the garden is busy in its own slow way. A novice carries a wooden bucket from the well, shoulders hunched against the chill. Another shakes crumbs from a cloth for the abbey birds, though a stern older monk tells him not to encourage thieves with wings. Near the wall, skeps for bees sit beneath little roofs of thatch, quiet now in the cold, their woven sides darkened by weather. You can imagine them in summer, the warm hum, the clover-heavy air, the monks moving carefully with veiled faces and smoky pots, collecting honey as if borrowing sweetness from a dangerous kingdom. You are brought to a bench near the kitchen door, where a bowl of hot pottage is placed in your hands. It is thick with leeks, beans, and a few pale shreds of smoked fish, and you eat while steam warms your face. A trencher of coarse bread lies across your knees. Nearby, brothers in dark habits gather around the bee skeps, not because the bees are active, but because people who live by bells must discuss matters at the correct hour, even if the creatures involved are sensibly asleep. The ink-stained monk from last night is here too, or perhaps another monk much like him, with the same permanently marked fingers and the same expression of a man listening for errors in the universe. He recognizes you, lifts a brow, and seems only mildly surprised that the road has already delivered you to another animal dispute. Medieval life, you begin to suspect, is less a series of events than one long argument about ownership, weather, and animals with poor boundaries. A younger monk holds a broken piece of wax comb in his palm. It is golden, fragrant, and ragged at the edge. He says someone found part of the abbey hive disturbed near the garden wall. A bird may have pecked it loose. A boy may have stolen it. A wandering bear is proposed by the oldest gardener, then dismissed because no bear has been seen within 10 miles, though no one sounds entirely relieved. The more immediate question is whether the creatures of the garden, bees, crows, sparrows, and all the small winged hunger of winter can be blamed for damage in any true sense, or whether blame must be reserved for beings who understand sin, rent, fences, and the price of wax. This is where the argument becomes wonderfully tangled. One brother says bees are orderly creatures, models of labour, living in a community under a ruler as any good abbey should. Another brother objects that bees also sting novices, swarm without permission, and occasionally take up residence in church roofs, where they drip honey into places no honey should drip. A third says birds are worse, especially the crows, because they steal seed from newly sown fields and look directly at you while doing it. The gardener says crows are clever enough to be ashamed, which is not proof but sounds satisfying. No one can quite agree whether cleverness makes an animal more guilty or merely more annoying. The ink-stained monk listens, hands tucked into his sleeves, then reminds them that small creatures have long been treated with a strange mixture of awe and suspicion. Bees are blessed in sermons for diligence, prized for wax that feeds the candles before saints' relics, and whispered over by some country folk when a master dies, lest the hive grow offended and leave. Some swear you must tell the bees of births, deaths, marriages, and misfortunes, because bees dislike being left out of household news. You picture a widow leaning toward a hive at dusk, informing thousands of tiny golden listeners that Uncle Martin has passed. The cow has calved, and the roof still leaks. It is oddly tender, and only a little alarming. Birds fare less gently in the debate. Doves belong to peace, ravens to prophecy, owls to ill omen or wisdom depending on who has lost sleep, and sparrows to pure opportunism. The novice who fed crumbs insists that even sparrows are God's creatures. The gardener replies that God may keep them. Then, preferably away from the peas, you hide your smile behind your bowl. A bell rings again, this time nearer, and the brothers pause instinctively. their argument folds itself into silence as they turn toward the chapel. The pause is brief, but it changes the mood. In this place, every dispute passes beneath the bells. Wax, feathers, seeds, honey, damage, all of it is held for a moment inside the same sound that marks prayer. You stand beside the herb beds while the last note fades, noticing little charms tied under the eaves of the kitchen, a twist of red thread, a sprig of dried rue, a horseshoe nail black with age. The cook says they keep weasels from the hens. Even now, it is hard to tell whether they keep anything away, but no one takes them down. After the prayer hour, the brothers return less eager to condemn. The broken comb is weighed in the hand, smelled, inspected. The gardener points to small marks in the mud near the wall. Not bird claws, he says, not beework, human fingers, perhaps a child's, perhaps a hungry traveller's, perhaps a lay worker with a sweet tooth and poor timing. The younger monk looks embarrassed for having nearly accused the crows. The crows in the orchard remain silent, which may be dignity or guilt. The ink-stained monk says that this, too, is why words matter. If the village blames birds, it may hang nets. If it blames bees, it may move the hive. If it blames a child, perhaps the kitchen must ask why the child was hungry enough to risk the abbey wall. Blame, he says, is a cart that must be hitched carefully, or it crushes the wrong feet. You carry your empty bowl back to the kitchen door. The sun is already slipping behind a veil of cloud, and the garden settles into its winter patience. The bee-skeps remain still beneath their thatch. The birds return to their branches, and somewhere outside the wall, your stray dog gives one soft bark, as if politely objecting to the entire legal philosophy of exclusion. When you leave the abbey garden, the smell of wax clings faintly to your cloak, and the bell's echo follows you down the path. The abbey gate closes behind you with a soft wooden thud, and the road receives you again, damp, rutted, and patient in the way only old roads can be patient. The smell of beeswax fades slowly from your cloak, replaced by wet earth, leaf mould, and the honest sourness of winter fields. Behind the wall, the abbey bell keeps marking time for men in wool habits and bees asleep in their straw-roofed houses. Ahead, the land dips toward a broader road where cart tracks braid together, and by noon you see the smoke of another town lifting beyond a belt of bare elms. The stray dog, released from his unfair banishment at the abbey garden, trots ahead with renewed purpose, pausing now and then to look back as if you are the one who might wander off and disgrace the party. Your boots are heavy with mud. Your stomach is warmer than it deserves to be, thanks to the monk's leek pottage, and in your satchel sits a small crust given by the kitchen brother, who presses it into your hand with the solemnity of a man entrusting you with a relic, though fortunately a relic less likely to attract pilgrims. By the time you reach the town gate, the sky has thickened into a grey woolen lid. This place is busier than the last, built where two roads meet and traders gather even in the lean months. The gatehouse is flanked by timber shops and a ditch full of brown water, where ducks stand in the mud with the irritated dignity of minor officials. A toll-keeper sits beneath a little awning, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak, counting coins into a wooden bowl. Every cart must stop. Every pack must be inspected. Every basket is considered suspicious, especially those covered with cloth, because a covered basket in the Middle Ages may contain bread, hens, eels, stolen candles, or someone's entire poor plan for the afternoon. You pay a small toll with a coin that looks thinner after leaving your hand. The toll-keeper bites it, squints, and waves you through. No one can quite agree whether biting coins truly reveals bad metal, or merely gives officials something unpleasant to do with their teeth. But the custom persists with confidence. Inside the town, market noise swells around you. Stalls line the square beneath patched awnings. Wool cloth hangs in dull blues, russets, and saffron yellows. A woman sells onions from a wicker basket. A man offers smoked fish on a board, their silver skins dulled by salt. Chickens complain from cages. A cooper taps hoops onto a small barrel. A peddler calls out bone needles, horn spoons, and cheap pilgrim badges, each one promising more holiness than its price suggests. Rushes have been laid before the Guildhall door, already dirty from boots. Above everything hangs the smell of ale, damp wool, horse breath, frying batter, and old straw. You are just beginning to think this town may concern itself with ordinary troubles when you hear the word rats. It passes first as a whisper near the grain seller's stall, then as a sharper complaint from a baker whose arms are white to the elbow with flour. Rats in the malt house, rats in the tithe barn, rats among sacks of rye, rats chewing through leather straps, nibbling candles, leaving little black insults across shelves, rafters, trenchers, and once, according to a woman with a very steady voice, inside a priest's spare shoe. The dog lifts his head. You follow the sound toward the Guildhall, where a cluster of townsfolk has gathered beneath the overhang to avoid the beginning rain. It comes softly at first, ticking against the awnings, darkening shoulders, making the square shine. A reeve stands on the hall steps with a parchment in hand, his cap pulled low, his expression grave enough for war, plague, or vermin with legal implications. Beside him is a clerk holding an inkhorn beneath his cloak to keep the rain from thinning his authority. The reeve begins to read. The rats of the town, particularly those dwelling in the malt house, granary, and neighbouring cellars, are summoned to appear and answer for damages done to grain, leather, stored candles, and other goods belonging to honest householders. The words are formal, carefully shaped, and wildly useless in the wet air. Yet everyone listens. The baker folds his arms. The grain seller nods at each charge. A child giggles until his mother gives him the look that has ended laughter since the beginning of families. You stand under the eaves with rain dripping from your hood, hearing the summons carried into the square as if the rats might be waiting respectfully behind a cheese stall. Some swear such summonses must be read in the places where the creatures caused harm, so that no rat may later claim ignorance through its tiny counsel. Others say the words are for human ears, not rat ears, meant to turn panic into order and damage into account. Even now, it is hard to tell whether anyone truly expects a rat to appear, whiskers washed, paws folded, ready to defend its appetite. The reeve finishes the first reading. Then, because procedure has the stamina of a donkey, he reads it again toward the malt-house lane. Rain thickens. A woman pulls her cloak over a basket of eggs. The dog shakes himself, splattering your boots and improving neither of you. The clerk writes down that the summons has been made publicly, before witnesses, in fair form, though fair seems generous given the weather. No rats appear. This surprises no one, yet everyone reacts as though a point has been proven. The baker says absence shows guilt. The cooper says absence shows prudence. The old woman with the priest's shoe story says rats are clever enough to avoid courts, which already makes them wiser than half the town. No one can quite agree whether their failure to appear is contempt, cowardice, ignorance, or excellent advice for all living creatures. The reeve announces that another summons will be made at the granary door, and the crowd moves that way with the gentle eagerness of people following a very slow miracle. You go with them, because the rain has settled into a steady curtain and there is comfort in company. Even company currently attempting to notify rodents of legal obligations. The granary stands at the rear of the square, raised on short stone supports to keep damp and vermin from the grain, though the rats have clearly treated this architecture as a suggestion. Its oak door is scarred near the bottom. Straw lies piled beneath the steps. A cat sits on the sill of a neighbouring house, washing one paw with deep indifference. Around its neck is tied a bit of red thread, a charm against sickness, or witches, or possibly professional disappointment. Some householders keep cats not merely as mouses but as suspicious little guardians of the threshold, though many will admit that a cat serves no master except warmth, meat, and its own smoky thoughts. The reeve reads again. Rain taps the granary roof. Somewhere inside, something small skitters. Every head turns. For one heartbeat, the whole square becomes still. The clerk holds his quill above the tablet. The baker stops breathing through his nose. The cat pauses mid-wash. You feel the dog stiffen beside you, alert now, ears forward. Another sound comes from within the granary, a scratch, a faint rustle, then silence. The reeve clears his throat and completes the summons with added force, as though volume may succeed where law has so far only dampened parchment. He demands that the rats appear at the appointed time to answer the charges brought against them. The granary answers with nothing. This nothing is strangely powerful. It gathers in the wet square, under cloaks and awnings, around boots planted in mud. The people have spoken into the dark places where their food disappears. They have named the fear that lives in walls and thatch, the little teeth working while households sleep, the gnawed sacks and spoiled stores that can make winter leaner than it already is. Rats are ridiculous defendants. Yes, but ruined grain is not ridiculous. Hunger is not ridiculous. A candle eaten in the night is funny only if you have another candle. At last the reeve rolls the parchment, and the crowd loosens. Some drift back to stalls. Others hurry home to check their cellars. The baker mutters about traps, cats, and divine judgment, in that order. The old woman says tansy leaves near a threshold discourage vermin, unless the vermin have no respect for herbs, which, she admits, many do not. The rain softens the market sounds until everything seems wrapped in cloth. You step away from the granary, pulling your cloak closer. The dog walks beside you through the shining mud. Behind you, the cat resumes washing, the clerk shields his ink, and the town waits to see whether summoned rats will attend court, flee by night, or continue their ancient policy of eating first and answering never. The rain keeps falling, steady and grey, turning the market square into a shallow mirror where boots, hooves, wheels, and hems make brief dark ripples before the mud swallows them. You leave the granary behind with the summons still hanging oddly in your ears, a formal invitation cast into rafters, holes, and hidden straw. The dog trots close against your leg now, less from affection than from a practical wish to avoid the worst puddles, though he accepts any illusion of loyalty you care to place upon him. Across the square, the sign of an alehouse swings beneath its wooden beam. The painted picture has faded so badly that it may once have shown a fox, a lion, a weasel, or possibly a very troubled horse. Someone has scratched a cup beneath it to clarify the business, which feels wise. Smoke leaks from the thatch, and yellow light glows in the small horn-paned windows. You duck under the low lintel and step into warmth, noise, and the comforting smell of damp wool beginning to steam. Inside, rushes cover the packed earth floor, mixed with crushed herbs that release a sharp green scent when people tread on them. A fire burns in a wide hearth, where iron fire tongs lean beside a pot of something dark and onion thick. Men and women sit along trestle tables with wooden cups of ale, trenchers of coarse bread, bits of cheese, smoked fish, and pottage. A serving girl moves between benches with the graceful caution of someone carrying both hot broth and other people's tempers. Near the hearth, stockings hang from a peg to dry, giving off a smell that suggests the feet have not fully departed. You find a place on a bench near the wall, and the dog slips beneath the table before anyone can object. The alewife notices him, opens her mouth, then sees his wet eyes and your tired face and decides mercy is cheaper than argument. She brings you a cup of small ale and a wooden bowl of pottage, thick with barley and leeks. It warms your hands before it warms your belly. Outside, the rain taps the roof, and inside, the talk returns again and again to rats. Only now, near the fire, the rats begin to become mice. It happens through storytelling, as creatures do when carried by human tongues. The granary rats become cellar mice, then church mice, then a whole creeping nation of small grey thieves accused of nibbling grain, wax, parchment, and one unfortunate cheese set aside for a feast day. A man with a red scarf insists he once found mouse teeth marks in a page of accounts, proving that even vermin dislike taxation. The alehouse appreciates this more than the clerk at the next table does. At that same table sits a narrow man in a dark green robe trimmed with worn fur. His cap is neat, his beard carefully clipped, and his fingers rest around his cup as if he is warming not only his hands, but an argument. You hear someone call him Master Perrin. He is, they say, a man who knows laws, customs, fees, delays, petitions, and the particular phrases that make officials sigh heavily and reach for more ink. Not a great lord's advocate, no, but clever enough for villages, mills, boundary quarrels, unpaid rents, and now, apparently, the moral defence of mice. When the baker declares again that the absent rats prove guilt, Master Perrin lifts one finger. Absence, he says, may prove many things, fear of cats, for instance. The table quiets, because everyone enjoys a man who speaks calmly while making trouble. He explains that if small creatures are summoned, then the summons must be fair. If they live in many holes across the town, perhaps not all have heard. If they must appear at court, perhaps the roads are unsafe. If cats prowl the alleys, if dogs wait near granary doors, if boys stand ready with sticks, then how can any mouse, however obedient, travel safely to answer charges? The alehouse sits with this. Then laughter rises, soft at first, then warmer. The alewife shakes her head and mutters that if mice deserve safe passage, her husband deserves sainthood for finding his own boots in the morning, yet even she smiles. Master Perrin does not smile too much. That is part of his skill. He speaks as though mouse liberty is a delicate matter of kingdom-wide concern. A proper defendant, he says, must receive notice. A proper defendant must have time. A proper defendant must not be expected to cross hostile ground without assurance against violence. If the town's cats remain loose, he argues, the mice may reasonably delay. If the dogs are not restrained, the rats may fail to appear without contempt. If the holes are many, the summons must be read in all places where the accused are said to dwell. The dog under the table sighs deeply, perhaps at being named as an obstacle to justice. No one can quite agree whether such arguments were ever made with a straight face because people believed in animal rights, because lawyers enjoyed stretching law until it creaked, or because a clever delay could save a client from paying too much too quickly. In the glow of the alehouse, with rain on the roof and steam rising from wet cloaks. It is easy to believe all three. Law here is not a shining sword. It is more like a wool blanket patched by many hands, full of holes, still useful, and sometimes smelling faintly of goat. Master Perrin leans closer to the fire and tells of a case in another town, or so he says, where mice accused of ruining barley were granted time to appear because the season was harsh, their young were small, and the way to court was guarded by enemies. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the advocate spoke for the mice themselves or for the villagers who might otherwise be fined for failing to protect the grain. But the argument delighted everyone who heard it. And once a legal jest has pleased a market town, it lives longer than many kings. A clerk near the window sniffs and says that Law should not be mocked. Master Perrin turns to him kindly. Then Law should avoid being funny. This earns another low ripple of laughter, though the clerk pretends to study his cup. You eat slowly, letting the pottage settle heavy and warm. Around you, the alehouse becomes a little world against the rain. A woman darns a wool sleeve by firelight. A pilgrim with a tin badge shaped like St. James's shell rubs his sore ankle and swears by a poultice of plantain leaves and lard. The alewife hangs a sprig of dried rowan above the buttery door, saying it keeps sour luck from the barrels. Even now, it is hard to tell whether sour luck or careless brewing causes more trouble. But nobody argues with rowan when the ale is drinkable. Master Perrin's voice grows softer as the hour deepens. He says people laugh at the thought of mice needing courtesy, and rightly enough, because a mouse will not bow, sign a pledge, or promise to stop eating oats. But beneath the laughter lies something quieter. If the court must speak even to creatures who cannot answer, then it must speak carefully. If blame must be assigned, then the path to blame must be walked step by step, not rushed with a torch and a shout. Even ridiculous mercy teaches the village what fairness sounds like. You look toward the dark window, where rain threads down the horn panes. Somewhere beyond the square, in the granary walls, small bodies may be moving through straw and shadow, utterly unimpressed by summonses, advocates, and human hunger. Somewhere nearer, a cat waits beneath an eave, believing in no law except patience. Inside, the fire burns low and red, and your half-burned candle from the monastery seems to glow again in memory. Another small light trying to hold back disorder. At last the alehouse talk turns to prices, roads, damp hay, and whose cousin has the worst mule in 3 parishes. Master Perrin finishes his cup and folds his hands into his sleeves. The dog under the table sleeps with his nose on your boot, safely beyond accusation for now. Rain softens toward evening, not stopping so much as growing too tired to fall properly. Inside the alehouse, the fire sinks into red coals, cups empty, and the talk of mice with legal privileges settles into the rafters beside smoke, wool steam, and the smell of onions. You have almost convinced yourself that the sensible thing is to stay beside the hearth until morning, but medieval comfort is a shy animal and flees when someone opens a door. A farmer enters with mud up to his knees and worry all over his face. His hood is dark with wet, his hands are cracked from cold, and under one arm he carries a bundle of chewed green leaves as solemnly as if they were relics. The alehouse turns toward him. People know that expression. It is the look of a man whose field has begun to disappear one bite at a time. Caterpillars, he says. Master Perrin raises one eyebrow. The baker mutters that at least rats have the decency to be visible when they steal. The alewife crosses herself, though whether against caterpillars, ruined crops, or farmers bringing wet leaves indoors is unclear. The farmer lays the leaves on the table. They are ragged, riddled, bitten into lace. A widow near the hearth leans forward, touches one with a careful finger, and whispers that the same little green worms have been seen along the lower bean plots. The cabbage rose and the winter greens near Syntocythe's ditch. No one can quite agree whether caterpillars count as beasts, pests, warnings, punishments, or simply hunger wearing many legs. Still, when a field is threatened, nobody remains seated for long. Cloaks are pulled tight, cups are set aside, and a small company forms with the strange readiness of village life, where private trouble may become public before the pottage cools. You step outside with them into the wet lane. The dog, awakened from beneath the table, stretches, shakes himself violently, and showers 3 pairs of shoes with rainwater. The group moves toward the edge of town, led by the farmer with the ruined leaves, followed by 2 widows, the alewife's nephew carrying a lantern, Master Perrin for reasons of professional curiosity, and a thin parish priest fetched from a nearby house with half his supper still tucked in one cheek. He swallows, adjusts his cloak, and brings a little book wrapped in cloth beneath his arm. From the book hangs a ribbon faded nearly pink. He also carries a small vial of holy water, which he handles carefully, for the cork looks less reliable than faith requires. The rain has left the road slick. Your boots sink and lift with slow wet sounds. Beyond the last houses, the fields spread under a low sky, divided by hedges, ditches, and wattle fences patched with whatever winter has not yet stolen. Smoke rises from distant cottages, blue and thin. Somewhere a cow lows from a byre, and the sound feels warm simply because it belongs indoors. The damaged field lies beyond a stile near the ditch. Lantern light washes over rows of cabbages and beans, their leaves silvered with rain and bitten along the edges. At first, you see nothing. Then the farmer lifts a leaf and shows you the small green bodies clinging beneath, curved and still, each one no larger than a finger joint, each one somehow capable of becoming an agricultural crisis. Some swear such creatures can be cursed formally, named before God, warned from the field, and ordered to depart by a certain day, as if they are unruly tenants ignoring rent day. Others say the words matter because the people need to hear that help has been asked, even if help must arrive through frost, birds, weather, or patient hands picking worms from leaves by dawn. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the priest believes the caterpillars understand him, but he opens his book with ceremony, and everyone grows quiet. The priest speaks Latin into the rain. The words fall over cabbages, mud, lantern smoke, bent backs, and anxious faces. You do not understand every phrase, but you understand the shape of it: warning, prayer, command, mercy. The insects are told to leave the fields of honest Christians, to trouble no more the poor who depend upon these greens, and to seek another place prepared for them by Providence, though one widow whispers that Providence had better not prepare it in her garden. This is not quite a trial, not quite a sermon, not quite a charm. It is all those things braided together like straw rope. Master Perrin watches with his hands folded in his sleeves, perhaps considering whether the caterpillars have been given proper notice. The farmer kneels in the mud and pinches worms from leaves into a wooden bowl. His fingers move steadily, tenderly almost, though his jaw is tight. The widows do the same, muttering prayers under their breath. One has tied red thread around her wrist to keep away swelling in the joints. Another carries a little pouch of dried fennel and wormwood, saying the smell turns pests aside. The priest walks the boundary of the plot, sprinkling holy water from the vial. Droplets catch the lantern light. At each corner he pauses, murmurs, and marks a sign in the air. The alewife's nephew plants small crosses of peeled willow twigs in the soil, one by the ditch, one by the stile, one near the cabbage rows. The old custom, someone says, is to set the crosses before sunrise, but rain makes exceptions of all men. You help lift a sagging wattle hurdle back into place where runoff has pushed it aside. Your gloves grow wet, mud works under your nails. The dog noses through the rows, sniffs one caterpillar, and decides the law may keep it. This, you think, is how most justice ends with tired people doing the work the ritual cannot finish. Yet the ritual changes the field. Not the leaves, not at once, but the air around them. The farmer's fear becomes shared. The widow's worry becomes spoken. The priest's Latin gives shape to helplessness, and the little willow crosses stand in the dark like thin, pale fingers holding the boundary through the night. It is absurd to threaten caterpillars with legal language. It is also understandable. Hunger makes even small mouths enormous. The rain stops at last. Clouds loosen in the west, and a dim strip of evening shows beyond the hedgerow. The priest closes his book. The farmer covers the wooden bowl, not cruelly, but firmly, and says he will carry the gathered worms beyond the stream before dawn. Some swear this works only if you do not look back. Others insist you must look back once, to shame them. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, which may be why caterpillars remain so bold. You leave the field slowly, boots heavy, lantern swinging ahead. Behind you, the cabbages glimmer wet and torn beneath the first pale stars, guarded by willow crosses, old words, and the exhausted hope of people who cannot afford to lose another leaf. You come back from the damaged field with mud on your hem, cold in your sleeves, and the smell of crushed cabbage leaves following you like a small green ghost. The farmer parts from the group near the town ditch, carrying his covered wooden bowl with both hands, and the priest turns back toward his supper, now certainly cold enough to count as penance. The widows walk together beneath one lantern, murmuring over whether the willow crosses will hold until morning. No one can quite agree whether the caterpillars will obey prayers, weather, birds, or simple removal, but everyone agrees the field feels less abandoned than before. You sleep that night in a corner of the alehouse loft, wrapped in your cloak on a straw pallet while rainwater drips from the eaves, and someone below snores with the confidence of a cathedral organ. Before dawn, the town bell wakes you, followed by the alewife's rooster, who wisely produces only noise and no suspicious eggs. You climb down the ladder into the dim room, where the hearth is ash-grey and the floor rushes smell of damp herbs, spilled ale, and yesterday's boots. The alewife gives you a heel of bread, a lump of cheese, and a warning that the Eastern Pilgrim Road is soft after rain. The dog waits outside the door. He sits in the mud with his tail wrapped around his paws, looking as though he has spent the night considering your flaws and has decided to continue travelling with you anyway. His coat is patched brown and grey, one ear slightly torn, his ribs not sharp but not hidden either. When you step into the lane, he rises at once. You tell him he is not invited. He wags his tail once, politely ignoring the ruling. Medieval law, you begin to think, may summon rats and threaten caterpillars. But it cannot persuade a dog to reconsider a journey. The town gate opens just as dawn spreads thinly over the rooftops. Pilgrims gather outside it, adjusting packs, tightening belts, touching badges pinned to hats and cloaks. You see scallop shells, little leaden saints, a tin cross bent at one arm, and a painted badge of a local holy well whose water, some swear, cures fevers, bad dreams, and the kind of cough that makes mothers look toward the churchyard. A woman carries a staff smoothed by many miles. A young man has tied strips of cloth around his feet where his shoes have split. Another pilgrim keeps a small bone charm in a pouch at his neck, saying it belonged to a blessed hound that once guarded a hermit from wolves. Even now, it is hard to tell whether he believes this, or simply enjoys having a story near his heart. You fall in with them as the road slips between hedges silvered with dawn. The dog takes the lead, then drops back, then trots ahead again, inspecting puddles, cart ruts, and the moral quality of roadside smells. Mist lies low over the fields. Somewhere behind you, bells mark prime at the town church, their sound fading into the open country. Ahead, the pilgrim road winds toward a line of bare trees and a low hill crowned by a weathered wayside cross. The walkers settle into that quiet rhythm known to all long roads. Staffs tap, boots squelch. Breath warms the cold air. Someone begins a low prayer, not loudly enough to become a song, but enough to keep time. You pass small cottages where smoke leaks through thatch, sheepfolds patched with wattle, and a byre door marked with chalk crosses to keep sickness from the animals. At one farm, an old man hangs a strip of red cloth above the stable lintel, saying it turns away the evil eye from his best mare. Some swear horses sicken if praised too openly, so he calls the mare that tolerable beast with great affection. As the sun climbs, the pilgrims begin trading stories, because walking loosens tongues as surely as ale does. The first tale is of a hound that refused to leave its master's grave, lying beside the church wall through frost and Lent, accepting scraps from villagers but never sleeping under any roof again. The woman with the smooth staff says this proves dogs know loyalty better than men. The young man with the split shoes says it proves the dog preferred outdoor accommodations, which earns him a gentle cuff from his aunt. Another pilgrim tells of a shepherd's dog accused of leading sheep through a neighbour's barley. The dog, he says, stood in the manor yard with its head lowered while the shepherd swore it had only followed a stray lamb. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the dog was treated as witness, culprit, or evidence with fur. The neighbour demanded payment. The shepherd blamed a broken hurdle, and the reeve blamed everyone for wasting his morning. In the end, the fence was mended, the barley valued, and the dog was given a crust by the reeve's wife, which suggests the court's private opinion differed from its official one. Your own dog trots back at the mention of crusts and looks up hopefully. You break a small piece from your bread and give it to him. He accepts with solemn speed. By midday, the road reaches the wayside cross. It leans slightly, its carved Christ worn smooth by rain and fingers. At its base are offerings: a chipped bead, a candle stub, 2 pins, a twist of wool thread, and a little wooden dog no longer than your thumb. Someone has carved it crudely, with pointed ears and a curled tail. A pilgrim says travellers leave such tokens for St. Gwynfort, or for another local guardian of beasts and children, though the priests do not always approve. No one can quite agree whether the holy dog was truly a saint, a loyal animal, a foolish legend, or a village memory too stubborn to be preached away. The pilgrims pause there to eat. You sit on a damp stone and unwrap your cheese. The dog settles at your feet, nose on his paws, watching every hand that moves near food with reverent attention. Around you, people share coarse bread, smoked fish, onions, and small ale from leather bottles. One woman rubs her knees with the salve of comfrey and goose grease. A man ties a blister with clean linen and claims spiderwebs stop bleeding better than cloth, though nobody volunteers a fresh wound to test his confidence. The stories grow stranger in the resting hour. A black dog seen at crossroads before storms. A white hound appearing near a ruined chapel where no living kennel stands. A mastiff that barked during testimony in a land dispute, causing one man to confess he had moved a boundary stone by moonlight. The pilgrims laugh softly at that, but with a little unease. In a world where animals live close enough to hear every quarrel, it is not hard to imagine them as witnesses. They sleep under tables, in yards, beside hearths. They see who passes the gate after dark, who opens the granary, who cuts the fence, who returns with mud on the wrong hem. Master Perrin would perhaps argue that a dog's testimony requires interpretation, safe passage, and protection from cats. But Master Perrin is not here, so the road must manage without him. After the meal, the sky clears to a pale blue, and the pilgrims rise one by one. You touch the worn base of the cross before moving on, not because you are certain of anything, but because uncertainty has its own manners. The dog stands when you stand. His shadow stretches thin across the road. As you continue, the landscape grows quieter. The afternoon light warms the hedges. Water drips from branches in slow beads. Behind you lie the town, the rats, the alehouse, the field of threatened cabbages. Ahead, the pilgrim road bends toward low hills and unknown courts. The dog keeps following, sometimes beside you, sometimes ahead, sometimes pausing to listen to things no human ear can catch. Some swear a dog chooses a traveller only when the road itself has something to teach. Others say a dog chooses anyone carrying bread. You keep walking, and for now, both explanations feel equally sound. By afternoon, the pilgrim road narrows into a lane bordered by thorn hedges and low stone walls furred with moss. The sky, which had briefly remembered how to be blue, begins to gather itself into darker folds, and the wind turns damp at the edges. One by one, the pilgrims pull up their hoods. The woman with the smooth staff says rain before sunset means the saints are washing the road for tomorrow's sinners. The young man with the split shoes says the saints might also consider mending it. His aunt does not cuff him this time, perhaps because she's saving her strength for the hill ahead. You climb slowly with the others, boots slipping where the lane turns to clay. The dog ranges ahead, vanishes through the hedge, reappears covered in burrs, and looks pleased with his choices. At the crest of the rise stands a manor gatehouse, squat and grey, built where the Lord's Domain road meets the village track. Its arch is deep enough to shelter a dozen people from rain, and as the first drops begin to fall, everyone discovers a sudden respect for lordly architecture. You duck beneath the gatehouse just as the rain thickens into a steady patter. The space smells of wet wool, horse leather, old straw, and the iron tang of hinges. A bench runs along one wall, a lantern hangs from a hook, though it is not yet lit. On the packed earth floor lie scattered rushes, trampled and damp, and in a corner stands a barrel for collecting drips from the roof, which appears to be ambitious in its collection. Outside the arch, rain beads along the edges of carts and darkens the backs of sheep in a nearby fold. You expect only to wait until the shower passes. Instead, you find yourself at the edge of another court. In the yard beyond the gatehouse, several villagers have gathered before the steward's table, which has been dragged under a lean-to beside the wall. The steward sits wrapped in a dark cloak, a little roof of waxed cloth stretched above him, while a clerk tries to keep parchment dry by leaning over it like a hen sheltering one chick. A reeve stands nearby with a staff. 2 goats, the clear cause of everyone's damp misery, are tied to a post by the well. They are handsome creatures in a guilty way, one brown and white, one black with pale horns, both chewing steadily as if the law has provided them with excellent entertainment. The black one has a strand of cabbage leaf hanging from its mouth. This detail does not help its case. A woman in a saffron-coloured hood points toward the goats with the trembling authority of someone whose garden has been personally wronged. She says they broke through the fence behind her cottage, crossed the bean patch, trampled the leeks, ate the outer leaves of 3 cabbages, and nibbled at a 4th in a manner that cannot be forgiven, because the 4th was meant for her sister's lying in meal. A man beside her, broad-shouldered and rain-shiny, insists the goats belong to his cousin. Not to him, though everyone seems to know they sleep in his shed whenever the cousin is conveniently absent. No one can quite agree whether goats are animals, punishments, or small demons wearing useful milk pails as a disguise. The steward asks about the fence. The woman says the fence was sound enough before the goats expressed an opinion. The man says the fence was a disgrace already, and that even a modest breeze could have entered without paying toll. The reeve is sent to examine a broken wattle panel brought as evidence, and he holds it up under the lean-to while rain drips from its woven sticks. It is difficult to tell whether it was broken by goats, weather, old age, or the general sadness of fences in winter. The brown and white goat sneezes. The clerk writes something down. You sit on the gatehouse bench, listening as rain softens the world outside and hardens everyone's patience inside. The pilgrims murmur among themselves. One says goats always find the weakest fence because they are guided by the devil. Another says goats find weak fences because weak fences are visible to anyone with eyes. Even now, it is hard to tell which explanation is more popular, though the devil receives steady employment in village reasoning. The steward turns to the question of tolls, because the goats had apparently crossed through the market lane earlier that same morning and scattered a basket of turnips near the toll post. The toll-keeper claims loss of order, loss of turnips, and loss of dignity. You remember old Martin's injured stool and wonder how much dignity survives in these villages by the end of a week. The toll-keeper demands a small payment for the disturbance. The goat owner, or cousin of the owner, objects that goats do not owe market tolls because they were not being sold, driven, traded, weighed, blessed, shorn, or otherwise turned into coin. The steward rubs his forehead. The dog, who's been lying beneath the bench, lifts his head at the word turnips, then lowers it again when no turnips appear. A shepherd waiting under the arch offers advice nobody requested. He says a strip of hazel tied over a goat pen keeps wandering down, provided the knot is made before dawn, and nobody curses while tying it. The saffron-hooded woman replies that a better charm is a door that shuts. The shepherd concedes this may also help. A pilgrim beside you whispers that in his village. People hang little bells on stubborn goats so they can hear trouble approaching. Though he admits goats soon learn to move quietly when they're doing something especially expensive. The rain grows louder for a while, drumming on the lean-to, ticking from the gatehouse stones, running in little threads down the yard. A boy brings a wooden cup of warm ale to the steward, who drinks with the gratitude of a man surrounded by livestock and human certainty. The clerk shakes sand across the wet ink, and some of it clumps at once. At last, the steward gives judgment. The cousin who shelters the goats must help mend the broken fence with proper stakes before Sunday. He must pay the cabbage woman a modest amount for the damaged greens, not the full amount she asks, because the steward says the outer leaves were partly weathered already, a remark received with icy silence. The toll-keeper receives no payment for dignity, but he is allowed the scattered turnips if any can be found unbruised. The goats are to be kept tied until evening and watched thereafter. If they break loose again, the fine will double. This judgment pleases no one entirely, which may be how you know it is serious. The saffron-hooded woman folds her arms but nods. The goat-keeper mutters into his cloak. The toll-keeper looks wounded on behalf of commerce. The goats continue chewing, untouched by shame, law, or the economics of cabbage. The black one finishes the leaf and begins considering the post rope. As the rain eases, the villagers disperse into the yard, each carrying a damp piece of the argument away like a coal that may be blown back to life later. You rise from the bench and stretch your cold legs. The pilgrims gather their staffs. The dog shakes himself once more, and this time you are quick enough to step aside. Beyond the gatehouse, the road glistens under a pale break in the clouds. The manor bell sounds from a small turret, thin and practical, calling labourers back to tasks delayed by rain and quarrels. You pass the goats as you leave. The brown and white one looks at you with rectangular eyes, calm as a judge, foolish as a bucket, ancient as hunger. Some swear goats know exactly what they do. You glance back once from the road and see the black goat testing the rope with its teeth. You suspect they may be right. The manor gate falls behind you, with its damp bench, its weary steward, and its goats still testing the world one rope fibre at a time. The pilgrims spread out along the road again, quieter now, as people often are after witnessing law wrestle with cabbage. Rainwater shines in the cart ruts. Clouds break slowly overhead, and late afternoon light spills across the hills in pale strips, touching the hedges, the wet stones. And the dog's back as he trots ahead with the pleased look of one who has avoided both court and bath. The road begins to slope downward. You smell the river before you see it cold water, reeds, mud, fish scales, damp rope, and smoke from cottages where nets are hung to dry above low fires. The land opens into a broad valley stitched with streams and drainage ditches. Pollarded willows lean beside the banks like tired monks with green thoughts hidden for spring. Farther off, a mill wheel turns slowly under a timber mill house, creaking with each dip into the current. Its sound is steady and sleepy, a wet wooden prayer repeated over and over. You part from most of the pilgrims near a wayside shrine, where they turn toward an inn with a painted sign and the promise of straw pallets. You continue toward the river with two fishers, a miller's boy, and the dog, who has suddenly discovered a deep interest in smells left by water birds. The fishers carry wicker eel traps over their shoulders, long narrow baskets woven like secret tunnels. Their cloaks are patched with bits of sailcloth, and their hands are red from cold water. One has a knife at his belt for gutting fish. The other wears a little lead badge of St. Peter pinned to his hat, because a fisherman who travels without Peter is either brave, careless, or very new to rivers. At the mill, people have gathered under the dripping eaves. The miller stands with flour dust still ghosting his sleeves, though his boots are black with river mud. Beside him is a priest from a riverside parish, stout, solemn, and carrying a rolled parchment wrapped in oilcloth. A few fishers wait near the bank, shifting from foot to foot. A woman with a basket of laundry watches from beside the washing stones, her sleeves rolled despite the cold. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she is there for the dispute or simply refuses to let a gathering interrupt the sheets. You soon understand the trouble. The mill pond, fishers say, has grown strange with eels. They twist in the traps, slide through nets, foul lines, steal bait, and appear in places where no eel has been invited. The miller claims they clog the sluice screens and frighten his daughter, who found one alive in a bucket meant for soaking grain. One fisher mutters that eels have no respect for household boundaries. The laundry woman says neither do millers, but quietly enough that only half the group hears. No one can quite agree whether eels are fish serpents, water ghosts, or ropes that learned hunger. The priest unwraps the parchment. He explains that complaints have been brought to the bishop's officer, not because the bishop personally dislikes eels, though someone behind you whispers that no one has asked him properly, but because the creatures have troubled honest labour and caused disorder along the water. The parchment, he says, contains a warning and ban. The eels are to depart from the mill pond and keep to their proper channels, pools, and deeper river reaches, leaving the sluice, traps, and household buckets in peace. The dog sits down beside you, ears forward. A bishop's ban against eels is read aloud beside the mill water. The words sound grander than the weather deserves. They roll over the pond, the wheel, the reeds, the muddy boots, the wicker traps, and the dark water where, perhaps, eels listen with long, thoughtful faces. The priest commands them to trouble the people no more. He gives them a term of days. He invokes saints, order, and obedience. The mill wheel creaks. The river slides by. A duck near the far bank dips its head under water with insulting timing. Some swear creatures as water obey holy words better than creatures of field, because water remembers blessings, baptisms, and drowned bells. Others say water remembers nothing except how to get downhill. Those who tell such tales never fully agree, especially when a miller and a fisher are standing close enough to hear one another breathe. After the reading, the priest sprinkles holy water toward the pond, which feels bold considering the pond already has a great deal of water and has not yet improved morally. Droplets vanish into the surface. Rings spread outward. For a moment, everyone watches them, as if expecting the eels to rise in orderly procession and apologize. Instead, one eel turns in the shallows near the reeds. It is only a dark curl, slick and quick, there and gone. Still, several people gasp. The miller's boy crosses himself so fast he nearly strikes his own chin. The fisher with St. Peter on his hat says the eel is taking notice. The other says it is taking air. The laundry woman says if it would take itself elsewhere, the parish would be grateful. The priest continues with boundary words. He walks from the mill pond to the sluice, then to the stepping stones where women rinse cloth, then down to a muddy inlet where traps are set. At each place he reads a portion of the order. You follow with the others, your boots sinking near the bank. The dog sniffs a reed, sneezes, and wisely withdraws from theology. The fishers show the traps willow funnels baited with offal, tied to stakes with hemp cord. The miller shows the screen where leaves, sticks, and once, he claims, 6 eels tangled together like wet black thread. He says the blockage slowed the wheel and spoiled a grinding day, and in winter a lost grinding day means quarrels, late bread, and women arriving with sacks of grain and expressions that could sour milk. This, you understand, is the heart of it. The ban is ridiculous, yes. But the mill feeds the village. The traps feed families. The river is not scenery. It is work, supper, rent, toll, danger, and rumour. Near the washing stones, the woman tells you that some folk rub eel fat on aching joints, and others hang dried eel skin around a child's neck to ward off cramps. Though she would rather trust warm wool and a decent fire, some swear a live eel placed in ale will cure drunkenness by frightening the drinker sober. No one nearby recommends trying it, especially not with ale one hopes to finish. The bishop's parchment is finally rolled again as dusk gathers over the water. The priest says the ban has been read in proper places, before witnesses, with reasonable warning. The fishers nod. The miller nods. None of them looks fully satisfied, but satisfaction is rare in river country. Water always belongs partly to someone else. A bell sounds from a distant chapel, faint across the valley. Smoke thickens over the cottages. The mill wheel keeps turning, patient and damp, in the reeds. Something slips softly beneath the surface, ignoring parchment or obeying it slowly, or simply being an eel beyond human arrangement. You stand beside the darkening river with cold hands tucked into your sleeves. Around you, people begin to drift home toward pottage, mended nets, wool blankets, and small candles. The dog leans against your leg, warm and solid. And the water moves on, carrying law, prayer, mud, and moonlight together. The river path grows dim behind you, and the mill wheel's slow creak follows for a while, turning in your thoughts like a wooden moon. The priest disappears along a lane bordered with reeds, his parchment tucked beneath one arm. The dog walks close at your side, damp about the paws, carrying the smells of river mud, smoke, and every creature that has passed within a mile of water. A servant from the manor finds you near the chapel road, sent by the steward you met at the goat quarrel. Travellers may sleep in the outer hall tonight, he says, if they do not mind draughts, servants stepping over them before dawn, and more arguments than dreams. You do not mind, or rather, you mind less than sleeping under a hedge. The manor stands above the river bend, not a castle, but proud enough to remember one. Its walls are timber and stone, patched where weather has worried them. With a small tower over the stair and a yard full of carts, barrels, hens, and one suspicious goose who watches your dog with the authority of a minor bishop. Torches burn at the gate. The air smells of wet straw, horse sweat, boiled cabbage, and hay stored under the byre roof. Inside, the hall is long, dark, and warmer only near the hearth. Rushes cover the floor, holding the mixed scent of herbs, smoke, spilled ale, damp boots, and many winters of human doubt. Beeswax candles stand in iron holders along the walls, their flames bending whenever the doors open. Above, rafters vanish into soot. At the far end, beneath a faded hanging. The judge's table has been cleared after supper, but not after argument. You're given a wooden bowl of pottage and a place near the lower end of the hall. The dog receives a bone from a kitchen boy, which he accepts as if justice has finally produced one sensible verdict. Around you, servants fold trestle boards, a dairymaid counts trenchers, and an old woman scatters dried lavender among the rushes, saying it sweetens the room and discourages fleas. The steward says no herb on earth is strong enough for a boundary dispute. The judge is there, not in a robe of grandeur, but in a fur-lined gown with patched cuffs and a tired face. He has the look of a man who has listened all day to people insisting that fences were whole. Goats were innocent, eels were insolent, and neighbours were born deceitful. Beside him sits the clerk, drying parchment near the fire. Master Perrin has somehow arrived before you. He sits with his hands folded, smiling into his cup like a man warming a private joke. Talk moves slowly at first. The miller's complaint, the bishop's ban, the sow from the town, the rats who did not appear, the rooster's impossible egg, which causes the kitchen boy to cross himself and the dairymaid to snort into her sleeve. Soon the hall becomes a soft parliament of half-lit faces. Flames gutter low. Shadows climb the beams. Outside, wind presses against the shutters, and somewhere in the yard the suspicious goose gives one harsh cry, as if contributing evidence. The steward says animal trials keep order. A damaged loaf must be named. A broken fence must be examined. A field of chewed cabbages must not be left to fear alone. If a village does not gather, hear, speak, and judge, then anger seeps into every doorway like winter damp. The old woman with the lavender nods. She says people sleep better when blame has edges, even if the edges are drawn around a pig. The clerk says the written record matters most. What is written can be remembered without growing too many horns. The carter's wheel, the baker's loaves, Widow Alice's fence, the goat's cabbage leaf, the eel in the bucket. All of it becomes smaller once set into lines. You think of the ink-stained monk, his quill turning grunts and mud into names, charges, places, witnesses. Master Perrin says theatre matters too. This quiets the table. He does not mean mockery, though he enjoys mockery when it earns its supper. He means that people need to see justice happen. They need to stand in the square, in the rain, at the gatehouse, beside the granary, and watch the town speak with one mouth for a little while. A summons to rats may not instruct rats. A curse against caterpillars may not trouble caterpillars. But the act tells people that loss has not passed unseen. Even ridiculous ceremony can keep a village from tearing itself apart over crumbs, grain, and fear. No one can quite agree whether this makes the trials wise, foolish, holy, or merely useful. The judge lifts his cup. His candlelit face looks older than it did a moment before. Superstition is not always the opposite of order, he says. Sometimes it is the cloak order wears when the night is cold. That sentence settles over the hall. Even the kitchen boy stops scraping a pot. You hear the fire shift. A log falls inward, scattering sparks. The dog, full of bone and satisfaction, sighs under your bench. A chaplain near the hearth objects gently that creatures cannot sin as people do. A pig does not reason like a man. A rat does not repent. A caterpillar does not understand boundaries or bean rows. The old woman replies that many men understand these things poorly enough. The hall warms with soft laughter, not loud, only the kind that rises when people are tired and the truth is too plain to dress. The chaplain then speaks of signs. In old tales, animals warn saints, expose murderers, find lost relics, smell storms, and refuse to cross cursed ground. Some swear a horse will tremble before a hidden grave. Others say a cow turning her back to the wind foretells rain better than any clerk. Even now, it is hard to tell whether beasts reveal the world or whether people, frightened by the world, press meanings into every hoofprint and feather. You listen until the voices blur with firelight, justice, superstition, theatre, village order, 4 names for the same weary need to make sense of damage before darkness takes it. Your bowl is empty, your hands are warm. The half-burned candle on the judge's table leans to one side, and for a moment you remember the abbey garden, the quiet bee skeps, the monk saying blame must be hitched carefully. The servants spread straw pallets along the lower wall. Wool blankets are handed out, scratchy but welcome. The dog curls against your knees before anyone can forbid it. The candles are pinched out one by one until only the hearth remains, red and breathing. In the darkened hall, the argument fades into murmurs, then into sleep. Wind moves around the shutters. A goose mutters in the yard. Somewhere below the floor, perhaps, a mouse ignores every law ever written. You close your eyes inside the draught and warmth, and the strange courts of beasts drift through your mind like shadows passing over firelight. You wake before the hall fully wakes, in that grey hour when the hearth is only a red eye beneath ash, and the world seems to be holding its breath to avoid being assigned chores. Your blanket has twisted around one leg. Straw has found its way into your sleeve, your hair, and somehow the side of your boot. The dog lies pressed against your knees, warm as a loaf just pulled from the oven, and when you shift, He opens one eye with the deep disappointment of a creature whose excellent sleep has been disturbed by human restlessness. A servant moves through the dim hall with a rushlight, stepping over pallets, bundles, and outstretched feet. At the far end, the judge still sleeps in his chair beneath the faded hanging, his chin sunk to his chest, while the clerk is curled beside a stack of parchments, as if afraid the records may wander off in the night. Outside, the suspicious goose calls once in the yard, harsh and important, announcing dawn to anyone who had hoped to negotiate with it. You rise quietly, your bones object, but not with legal force. Near the kitchen passage, a girl gives you a heel of yesterday's bread and a small cup of warm ale. She says the road north is drier if you follow the ridge past St. Barthel's shrine, though she warns you not to pay too much for blessings there. A candle is one thing, she says, but if the keeper offers you holy straw for your mattress, walk on. No one can quite agree whether holy straw works better than ordinary straw, but after the night you have had, you suspect both mainly itch. You leave the manor as dawn stains the river mist-pale gold. The mill wheel is still turning below, slower now in the cold morning light. Smoke rises from cottages, and a boy drives 2 cows toward a common pasture, clicking his tongue and carrying a switch more symbolic than effective. One cow wears a little charm of blue thread braided into her halter. The boy says it keeps away elf shot, sudden lameness, bad milk, and jealous neighbours. Some swear such threads must be tied by the left hand before sunrise, though no one can quite explain why the left hand is trusted with things the village otherwise distrusts. The dog trots with you up the ridge path. The road here is firmer, patched with stones where water runs down from the fields. Thorn bushes line the way, their black branches shining with dew. Beyond them, the valley opens behind you, manor roof, river, mill, brown fields, pale smoke, all softened by mist until even quarrels seem gentle at a distance. Ahead, the path climbs toward a small roadside shrine set beneath 3 ancient yews. You hear it before you reach it. Not bells this time, but voices, low and layered, and the creak of cartwheels halted on the road. Pilgrims, farmers, drovers, and 2 women carrying baskets have gathered before a stone niche built into a little chapel wall. The chapel is barely more than a room, its roof sagging with moss, its door studded with iron nails. Wax has run in thick pale streams down the ledge beneath the niche. Inside the niche stands a wooden figure of St. Barthel, or possibly Saint Blais, or possibly a local holy man whose name has been improved by retelling. He holds one hand raised in blessing and the other over a carved ox that looks more like a patient loaf with horns. Beside the door, a shrine keeper sits on a stool wrapped in a russet cloak. He has a grey beard, sharp eyes, and the air of a man who has seen doubt arrive on 2 legs and leave after purchasing a candle. On a cloth before him lie little objects for offering beeswax tapers, strips of blessed thread, tiny lead badges stamped with a hoof print, and small twists of straw said to have touched the relic within. The relic itself rests in a little box with a cloudy horn window. You cannot see much through it. Something pale, something long, perhaps bone, perhaps horn, perhaps the most successful piece of old mutton in the county. Those who tell the tale never fully agree what the relic is. Some say it is a splinter from the staff of a saint who once calmed a maddened bull. Some say it is the finger bone of a holy shepherd whose flock never sickened. Others whisper it is part of an ox skull found behind the chapel generations ago, and promoted after proving useful during a difficult season of cattle plague. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the shrine protects beasts, comforts owners, or simply knows how to stand where worried people pass. You join the edge of the gathering as a farmer leads forward a dun-coloured ox with a rope halter. The beast is broad, slow, and gentle-eyed, with winter mud dried along its legs. Its owner says the ox has stopped pulling straight in the plough and now turns aside whenever it reaches the eastern end of the field. Some say the animal senses something buried there. Others say the field is stony and the ox is not a fool. The shrine keeper listens, nodding with exactly enough sympathy to suggest both holiness and business. He lifts a strip of thread, touches it to the relic box, and ties it near the ox's horn. He murmurs a blessing, then sprinkles the animal with water from a little bronze bowl. The ox blinks, accepts this interruption with more grace than most humans you have seen in court, and exhales warmly into the morning air. A woman behind you whispers that the relic once cured her neighbour's cow of swollen udder. Another replies that the cow recovered after the neighbour stopped feeding it mouldy hay. A drover says the relic turned wolves away from his flock one winter night, though a shepherd beside him says the wolves may have been turned away by 3 men with spears and a very angry dog. Your own dog perks up at this, as if willing to accept credit on behalf of the profession. The shrine keeper hears none of this, or pretends not to. Pretense, you are learning, is one of the pillars of medieval order, along with rope, smoke, and everyone agreeing not to examine old bones too closely. Inside the chapel, the air is close and dim. Rushes lie on the floor, mixed with dried lavender and rosemary. Beeswax candles burn before the niche, their flames small and steady, and the walls are marked with scratched prayers, names of cattle, names of children, little crosses, crude drawings of hooves, horns, and once, unmistakably, a pig. You think of Widow Alice's sow and wonder whether a candle here might shorten an animal's temper, strengthen a fence, or merely lighten a purse. A mother kneels with a child beside a small wooden lamb carved from pale ash. She offers it for the health of their flock. A shepherd places a tuft of wool in a crack of the wall. A miller's wife presses a coin to the relic box, then touches the coin to her forehead before leaving it on the cloth. Some swear that touching coin to relic and brow carries blessing into the household accounts, though if this is true, many households appear under-blessed. Outside, a debate begins under the yews. The drover insists the relic is strongest against wolves. The farmer with the ox claims it favours plough beasts, because saints understand useful labour. One of the basket women says hens need protection too, especially from foxes, sickness, and husbands who forget to latch doors. The shrine keeper says the saint's mercy is wide, which is a neat answer because it promises much and specifies little. You sit on a low wall to eat your bread. The dog rests his chin on your knee, watching the shrine keeper with professional suspicion. The morning grows brighter. Frost lifts from the grass. Pilgrims come and go, leaving candles, pins, thread, wool, coins, and fears shaped like prayers. Perhaps some animals recover, perhaps some do not. Perhaps the relic works upon the heart first, teaching frightened people to feed better, watch closer, mend gates, share warnings, and sleep believing their barns are not alone in the dark. When you rise, the shrine keeper offers you a blessed thread for the dog. The dog yawns. You buy the thread anyway because the road is long. Wolves are real enough, and doubt, like rain, is easier to bear with a little covering. The thread is tied loosely to the dog's collar. He shakes once, considers removing it, then decides against the labour. You leave the shrine beneath the yews, carrying the scent of wax and rosemary with you, while behind you the cloudy relic box glows softly in the candlelight, protecting oxen, wolves, gullible travellers, or perhaps simply the fragile hope that something kind watches over the byre door at night. By the time you leave the shrine behind, the road has brightened, but the day never fully warms. The blessed thread on the dog's collar catches against his rough fur, a little faded strip of hope bobbing as he trots. He appears no holier than before, though perhaps slightly more decorated. The ridge path carries you past fields where men turn sod with heavy ploughs and women pull winter weeds. A boy shakes seed from a linen pouch while muttering that crows understand curses better than kindness. Some swear seed should be sown with the right hand and covered with the left to confuse hungry birds, though no one can quite agree whether this confuses the birds, the soil, or the person doing the sowing. Toward evening you reach a small village by a crossing road and sleep in a low outbuilding beside 2 sacks of oats, 3 snoring pilgrims, and a hen placed there for reasons nobody explains. The dog curls near your feet, his blessed thread safe from wolves, eels, goats, and legal danger except fleas. Before sleep takes you, you hear the distant bell of a chapel and remember the half-burned candle at the monastery, the pig beneath torchlight, the rats who declined their summons, and the eel that turned once in the reeds. The medieval world settles around you in layers: stone, straw, smoke, law, prayer, and animals breathing just beyond the door. Dawn finds you on the road again, and soon the village market opens before you in a square no larger than a lord's kitchen garden but much louder. Mist lies in the low places, and first light spreads over thatched roofs, timber stalls, and the church wall. A bell rings from the little tower with cracked persistence, waking sellers, buyers, and one donkey who brays back as if the bell has asked for his opinion. The market is already crowded with creatures, human and otherwise. Donkeys stand near panniers of turnips and firewood, their ears moving independently like 2 small courts reaching separate judgments. Geese wander in a white, indignant troop near the well, hissing at boots, buckets, and the idea of peace. A sow with pale bristles noses straw beneath a cart, watched by a girl with a rope. Chickens flutter in wicker cages. A goat, tied very short to a post, tests the length of its tether with professional bitterness. Dogs slip between legs, some owned, some hopeful, all apparently convinced that markets are public feasts arranged by fools who drop things. You step into the square with your own dog close beside you. His blessed thread attracts comment from a woman selling onions, who says it may protect him from wolves but not from sausage sellers with bad tempers. A man mending a harness says dogs wearing blessings grow proud. The dog sniffs a puddle and sneezes, which does not support the theory. The stalls come awake in stages. Cloth is unfolded in russet, indigo, teal, and saffron. Fish are laid out on boards, their eyes pale. A baker stacks coarse loaves beneath a linen cover and glares at every passing pig with the long memory of his trade. A potter arranges clay jugs. A woman sells goose eggs from a basket lined with straw, tapping each one gently and warning that a cracked egg brings quarrels into the house unless cooked before noon, even now. It is hard to tell whether cooking prevents quarrels or merely gives quarrels breakfast. You buy a cup of warm ale from a boy whose hands are tucked into his sleeves. Near the church porch, a reeve sits with a board across his knees, collecting small market tolls and hearing complaints before they grow old enough to acquire witnesses. A donkey has stepped on a basket of leeks. A goose has bitten a man who claims he was minding his own ankle. 2 boys accuse each other's dogs of chasing hens. A woman insists the potter's mule leaned against her stall and caused 3 onions to roll into the mud, which the mule neither confirms nor denies. No one can quite agree whether the market's a place of trade, temptation, or a weekly rehearsal for Judgment Day. The reeve handles these matters with the tired skill of someone who has learned that every creature in a market is either hungry, frightened, stubborn, or selling something. The donkey's owner pays for the leeks in kind, surrendering a bundle of firewood and half an apology. The bitten man is told not to stand so close to geese. The boys are ordered to keep their dogs tied until the church bell rings again. The onion woman receives no payment, because the reeve says onions roll by nature and not all motion is crime. This ruling causes discussion among sellers, especially those who feel nature has been used against them in the past. The suspicious goose from the manor would have thrived here. You see one much like it near a trough, lifting its neck above the crowd with a gaze sharp enough to cut twine. A peddler swears geese can sense thieves, strangers, and storms. Another says geese sense only weakness and exposed fingers. Some swear goose fat rubbed on the chest helps a winter cough, while goose feathers sewn into a pillow bring truthful dreams. You suspect the dreams mainly concern being bitten. At the centre of the square, a public weighing scale hangs from a beam. Beside it stands a cage of piglets, each one pink, round, and filled with opinions. Their seller praises them as clever, strong, and peaceful, though one immediately bites the cage latch. A buyer asks whether they break fences. The seller says every pig tests a fence, just as every man tests a price. This is considered a good answer by no one, yet admired for shape. You drift past the stalls slowly, letting the market move around you like a river made of wool, hooves, steam, gossip, and bells. Your dog receives a dropped crumb from the baker, perhaps by accident, perhaps as tribute to his blessed thread. A child offers him the end of a turnip. He accepts it, chews once, and looks wounded by agriculture. By mid-morning, the sun finds the square, touching damp church stones and bright cloth, warming the backs of animals and people alike. The little disputes dissolve into trade. The donkey stands forgiven. The geese remain unforgiving. The pigs sleep in straw. The reeve rubs his eyes and drinks from a wooden cup. All around you, humans and animals share the same cramped world, bumping against one another's needs grain, shelter, cabbage, warmth, milk, rope, profit, scraps. And watching them, you begin to see why ridiculous laws grow here as naturally as weeds near a wall. When a village lived cheek by jowl with beasts, when supper depends on hooves, eggs, hides, wax, fish, wool, and the fragile obedience of fences, every animal becomes part neighbour, part servant, part danger, part joke. The market hums with that uneasy fellowship, and for one bright hour, people and creatures seem only slightly different in their appetite for trouble. The market loosens as the sun leans west, and the square that seemed so crowded at morning begins to empty in slow, uneven streams. Cloth is folded, baskets are lifted, ropes are untied, and animals are persuaded away with varying degrees of success. The donkey that argued with the bell now trudges beneath 2 panniers of firewood, ears drooping as if burdened by both timber and philosophy. The geese depart in a white, offended cluster, leaving the well to recover its dignity. The baker covers his remaining loaves with linen and eyes the last piglet until it is carried from the square. Your dog, still wearing his blessed thread, follows you toward the northern road with a gait suggesting he has conducted himself nobly in public, despite the turnip. By late afternoon, the road climbs again. The village falls behind, and the air grows sharper. Fields give way to rough pasture, then to low scrub and wind-bent trees, Far ahead, on a rise where the sky burns dimly behind it, a small keep stands above the road. It is not a great fortress from a song, not all banners and shining towers, but a squat stone place with a timber palisade, a gatehouse, a yard, a chapel bell, and smoke rising from within. It looks less like glory and more like shelter, which, after mud, trials, markets, and animals with astonishing legal careers, feels far more valuable. You reach it at dusk. Torches burn beside the gate, their flames dragged sideways by the wind. A guard in a wool cap asks your business, glances at the dog, then at the blessed thread, and says animals with holy decorations still sleep outside if they bite anyone. The dog sits with great innocence. The guard does not trust innocence. He has clearly met dogs, men, and perhaps goats. Inside the outer yard, the keep settles into evening work. A stable boy carries hay in a forked bundle. A maid hauls water from a well with both hands wrapped around the rope. Chickens climb toward their roost. A smith closes his shed, hanging his hammer on a peg beside a horseshoe charm blackened by smoke. Near the kitchen door, two servants argue quietly over whether bay leaves in the grain chest keep weevils away. Some swear they do. Others say weevils are too small to respect flavour. No one can quite agree, but the leaves remain, because hope is cheap when tucked into storage. You're given space near the lower hearth of the hall. It is a colder hall than the manors, with walls that hold the day's chill and give it back after sunset. Yet the fire is broad, the benches sturdy, and the rushes on the floor have been freshly scattered with sweet woodruff and lavender. Beeswax candles burn before a little shelf holding a chipped saint's image and a relic wrapped in cloth that no one names directly. You suspect every household keeps at least one sacred object whose history grows foggier in proportion to its usefulness. The household gathers slowly. Guards come in from the wall. Servants take bowls of pottage thick with peas and barley. A chaplain warms his hands near the flames. An old huntsman sits with a fur-lined cloak over his shoulders, his face lined like old leather, and when he sees the dog curled at your feet, he nods with approval. A road dog, he says. They know more courts than clerks. You smile into your bowl? Talk begins, as it always seems to, with animals. The old huntsman tells of a wolf brought near the walls one winter after taking sheep from the far fold. Not tried, not like the sow or summoned like rats, but spoken over, named as a danger, and buried beyond the boundary with iron nails set nearby to keep its restless hunger from returning. The chaplain frowns at the nails. The huntsman frowns at winter. The servants listen with the comfortable unease of people who enjoy being frightened beside a fire. A guard tells of a horse that refused to cross a bridge 3 days before the bridge collapsed. A maid says horses see what men ignore. Another says horses smell rotten wood, and men are too proud to bend down. Even now, it is hard to tell whether beasts are wise, wary, or merely closer to the ground. The chaplain, stirring his pottage, says the world is full of signs because people are full of fear. The huntsman replies that fear keeps sheep behind fences and men from sleeping under dead trees. The guard adds that fear also keeps him employed. This earns a small laugh, the sleepy kind that barely rises above the crackle of logs. You listen with your back to the bench and your hands around a wooden cup of warmed ale. All the strange judgments of your journey gather quietly inside you, the pig under torchlight, the monk with ink on his cheek, the rooster's impossible egg, the bees asleep in their skeps, the rats declining court, Master Perrin defending mice from cats, the priest warning caterpillars from wet cabbages, the goats chewing through law, the bishop's words cast across dark water for eels. Each tale is ridiculous, and none is only ridiculous. Beneath everyone lies a winter storehouse, a loaf, a field, a frightened child, a broken fence, a hunger small enough to hide in walls or large enough to come on 4 legs from the forest. No one can quite agree whether these laws truly belong to justice, superstition, comedy, or prayer. Perhaps they belong to the narrow space where people stand when they do not know what else to do. A village cannot command the weather, it cannot reason with hunger, it cannot ask rats to be merciful, or caterpillars to consider Lent, or eels to respect a miller's schedule. But it can gather, it can speak, it can name the damage, it can make someone mend the fence, it can wrap fear in words. And sometimes that is enough to get through another night. The old huntsman throws another log on the fire. Sparks rise like tiny souls and vanish into the soot-black rafters. Outside, the wind moves along the walls. The chapel bell sounds once, then again, soft and close. The dog sleeps with his chin on your boot, his blessed thread dark against his fur. For the first time since entering the walled town, you feel the journey folding inward, like a cloak drawn close around the shoulders. The hall grows quieter, bowls are cleared, candles shrink. A servant banks the fire with practised hands, laying ash so the coals will live until morning. Someone bars the oak door with an iron latch. Someone checks the shutters. Someone mutters that cats should be kept near the grain chest, whether or not the rats have legal objections. The keep settles into its night sounds, straw shifting, wood creaking, breath deepening, flame whispering low. You remain by the hearth a little longer, watching the light move over stone, wool, iron, and sleeping faces. The strange animal laws fade from spectacle into something softer. They become less a parade of absurdity and more a candle held against darkness, small, imperfect, and human. People laugh because pigs do not understand courts. They pray because fields can fail. They write because memory wanders. They summon rats because hunger has teeth. They bless dogs because roads are long. And you, cold-handed traveller, sit beside the last good warmth of the day, while the medieval world settles around you with all its mud, bells, beasts, and weary mercy. The fire sinks lower now, and the keep becomes gentle around its edges. The torches outside burn softly in the wind, but you no longer need to follow them. Your boots are off, your cloak is folded beneath your head. The rushes smell faintly of lavender, smoke, and rain-damp wool. Somewhere beyond the wall, an animal moves in the dark, perhaps a fox near the henhouse, perhaps only the old world turning in its sleep. No court is called for it now. No clerk reaches for ink. No reeve lifts his voice beneath the market cross. The dog breathes slowly against your ankle. The chapel bell is quiet. The half-burned candle on the shelf gives one last golden tremble, then steadies, small as a star seen through mist. You let the day loosen the muddy square, the abbey garden, the wet field, the river reeds, the shrine beneath yews, the market full of geese and donkeys, all drifting backward like lanterns carried away down a dark road. You do not need to solve the old laws tonight. You do not need to decide whether they were foolish or wise, cruel or kind, theatre or prayer. For now, it is enough that the doors are barred, the fire is warm, the straw is dry enough, and the world outside has softened to a hush. The animals sleep in byres, pens, lofts, rafters, river banks, and shadows. The people sleep too, wrapped in wool and hope, trusting fences, saints, locks, and mourning. So you close your eyes beside the hearth and the last sound is only the quiet breathing of the dog, the fading sigh of embers, and the deep old silence of stone holding the night,